Hello, everyone. I am back. This will be chapter 5 of Let the Circle Be Unbroken. It's a long chapter. All of them are long in this book. But I have to say, first of all, a big shout out to all my new subscribers. We surpassed 2,000 subscribers now. I'm trying to think of a small giveaway. So if you have any ideas, I tell you, I just as an aside, I actually do one of my hobbies is crocheting, and I like to crochet stuffed animals, and I'm thinking that um, I may put this little guy up for the giveaway, or I may ask that if you have a particular animal or superhero or whatever, that you might just put that in the comments below this video. So here is what I'm thinking. If you would rather have some other animal, then that would be fine. At the end of this book, probably not the end of this book, that'll be too far. But let's see, today is about the middle of August. The end of August, anyone who has subscribed to my channel and clicked on the little bell so you get a notification, and you write me a comment with your name in the comment. You can say hello from wherever you're from. Then I will put your name in the drawing for this little guy, this little bunny. He is an amigurumi. It's what they call this kind of crochet, is amigurumi. He's completely handmade. I can make him again in another color if you would prefer. But my little amigurumi bunny, I hope you can see him. So put your name in the comments and be subscribed, and at the end of August I will choose one winner for the little bunny rabbit. So let's get on with our story. Let the Circle Be Unbroken, Chapter 5. Oh, I better get my glasses so I can see. I've had a lot of problems with my voice lately, so if it starts doing funky things, then we may break this into 2 parts, but until I lose my voice again, Chapter 5, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. Christopher John, come on, Claude ain't coming. Christopher John glanced back at me and then looked hopefully again up the forest trail where for 2 years his friend Claude Avery had come running with his brother TJ to meet us each school morning. But this year Claude had only occasionally come down that path, and then because his mother made him. Always a shy boy overshadowed by his older brother, he had retreated into a lonely world of his own since last summer, and no one, not even Christopher John, could enter it. When Claude did come to school, he separated himself from the other students, and often could be seen sitting on a stump at the wood's edge mourning for TJ, in sobbing, hacking spasms that made everyone turn away from him, embarrassed. "Come on, Christopher John," Stacy said gently. "He ain't likely to come." "Maybe he just late this morning, Stacy. He come twice last week, 'member?" "I remember we was late too last week." I grumbled, not wanting to think about Claude or TJ or any of what happened. Stacy looked at me reproachfully. If he's coming, he can catch up, he told Christopher John. But we better go on now. We can't be late again. With that, he walked on with little man and me following in stride. Christopher John took one last expectant look up the trail, then followed. At the crossroads, we turned northward off the Harrison Road and began to listen for the Jefferson Davis school bus, which plagued us throughout each school year. At this time of year, its coming was particularly bad, since the narrow, winding road was usually soft with sloppy red mud, and the wide gullies on either side of it were filled with water, making it difficult for us to hop onto the steep forest bank for refuge. Now, as we heard the bus approaching, we scrambled onto the bank, where we watched in silent resentment as it passed, then jumped down again. Continuing on our way, we were soon halted by a familiar cry ringing from the forest. "Stacy! Hey, y'all, wait up a minute!" Running heedlessly down the steep decline was Jeremy Sims. We had not seen him since Christmas. Already ridiculed by the students at Jefferson Davis because he had chosen to be our friend, he had since the trial become an outcast as well. For talk had begun to spread among the white community that perhaps what TJ had said about R.W. Melvin's having had something to do with the murder of Jim Lee Barnett might be true. As far as I knew, no one had ever come right out and accused either of the Simses. After all, it had only been TJ's word against theirs. But the bad feeling and the talk had gotten so intense that both boys had gone north to Jackson in late December and had not come back. Shortly after, Jeremy's mother had taken Jeremy, his little sister Lillian Jean, and 4 younger brothers and sisters to Jackson as well. "Hey, y'all," Jeremy said, out of breath and grinning widely as he approached. I was afraid I was gonna miss y'all." I glanced at Stacy. There was no expression on his face. "When you get back?" he asked. "Last night, Pa wanted us back in time for planting. He picked us up in Strawberry. We come down from Jackson on the bus. It was about midnight before we got back. Ernest and Leroy, they was so sleepy, they ain't even up yet. But I wanted to see y'all." He stared at us, his happiness genuine. "Where's Lily and Jean?" I asked dryly. "She come back?" "Nah," Jeremy replied. "She's in school up there in Jackson, and she most likely gonna stay." "Good," I said. Jeremy eyed me knowingly. He was quite aware that Lily and Jean was someone I could easily live without. "Hey, little man, you've grown since I seen you." Little man held up his head. "I'm always growing." Jeremy smiled. "I reckon so. Christopher John, you all right?" Christopher John nodded. "You?" "Just fine." He paused a moment, then said, I sure missed y'all." Stacy glanced over at him, then back at the road as we started walking again. He had never quite known what to think about this strange white boy who offered his friendship even when we had not wanted it and had defied his family to be our friend. It was true that his brothers had helped cause TJ's destruction, but Jeremy had had nothing to do with that. Jeremy had simply always been just Jeremy. Stacy put out his hand. "It's good to have you back." Jeremy took Stacy's hand and pumped it eagerly. Relief was on his face. "You know, I didn't know how y'all was gonna feel," he said as we began walking again. "I mean, after what R.W. and Melvin done. I mean, what some folks say they done." He reddened at the correction, glancing over us shyly to see if we had noticed. None of us said anything. After all, R.W. and Melvin were his brothers. "That's done with now," said Stacy without emotion. "It wasn't your doing." Jeremy nodded, his face showing the guilt he felt despite Stacy's words. Then he dug into his shirt pocket. "Look here. I brung something for you." Pulling out a paper-thin package wrapped in tissue paper, he opened it carefully to reveal a picture of himself. Beaming proudly, he laughed. "Don't I look funny? Ma had it made up in Jackson. I ain't never had no picture made before." I peeped over at the black and white photograph. In it, Jeremy looked scared and uncomfortable, but the warmth and shyness which were so much a part of him showed through clearly. "I don't think it's funny," I said frankly. "I think it's nice, Jeremy." Jeremy looked at me surprised. He seemed touched. "You really do? Ma said I should have smiled." I restudied the picture. "No, it's just fine, just like it is." "Here, then why don't you take one?" he said, thrusting the picture at me in a spur-of-the-moment gesture. Then he pulled it back. "Wait a minute." He dug into his pocket. "Got a pencil here somewheres." He found the pencil and stopping, wrote on the back of it in a slow, awkward hand, "To Cassie, from Jeremy." "Thanks, Jeremy," I said as I took it from him. He grinned, pleased, and pulled out a second picture. "And Stacy, this here's for you. I mean, if you want it." Stacy hesitated before taking the picture. "Yeah, thanks, Jeremy." I wrote something on the back. Stacy flipped the picture over. Written simply was, "To Stacy Logan, my friend for always." Stacy, looking ill at ease as he often did when Jeremy displayed signs of affection, nodded stiffly and shoved the picture into his shirt pocket without saying anything further. Since I had no pockets, I slipped my picture into my reader. "Well?" We all looked over at Little Man. "Well, what?" I asked. "Well, don't Christopher John and me get no picture?" he demanded. Jeremy looked surprised. "Well, I only had two." Little Man scowled at him as if that were hardly an adequate excuse. "I tell you what, though, I get me a chance to get back to Jackson again, I'll go have some more made. That'll be all right." Little Man sighed in acceptance, if that was the best Jeremy could do. "Me too?" asked Christopher John. Jeremy chuckled softly. "Course you too," he said, then stuffed his hands into his pockets and talked all the way to the crossroads in spurts of enthusiasm, in that awkward way he had about his trip to Jackson. At the crossroads he said goodbye to us, then turned back toward home. "Ain't you going down to Jefferson Davis?" said Stacy. Jeremy looked down the road toward the whitewashed school and shook his head. "No, don't want to go back there no more." He lowered his head and kicked at the road. Without his saying why, we knew. Besides, with R.W. and Melvin and Jackson, Pa need me to help him, and he says 7th grade's more than enough education. Now as I can read and write and figure, that's more than him. He said goodbye again, waved and walked on. The boys and I watched him go. Jackson hadn't changed Jeremy a bit. He was still the same old friend. Cassie, how y'all come to get this land? I glanced over at Dubé Cross sitting at the other end of the front porch looking out at the fields as his two younger sisters, Lynette and Hannah, swayed gently on the swing. It was Saturday morning and they had come for Mama's review session, but finding themselves the first to arrive, they had chosen to sit on the porch until the others came. I was keeping them company. "Grandpa bought it?" But how? How he manage it?" I was pleased by Dubé's interest and was happy to tell him. "Well, Grandpa Paul Edward bought it long time ago in 1887. Had himself some money saved from furniture making, and he bought 200 acres from a Yankee. Then come 1918, he took himself a loan and bought them other 200 acres from Mr. Jameson. Mr. Jameson? Don't you know the Jamesons used to own a lot of land back in here, for then this here was Granger land?" Dubé looked truly surprised. I told him then about how part of the Granger plantation had been sold for taxes during the Reconstruction, and how the Yankee Mr. Hollenbeck had bought it. I told him about Mr. Hollenbeck selling it off again in 1887 to a number of farmers, and how Mr. Jameson's father had bought 1,000 acres of it, and Grandpa 200. I told him also how Harlan Granger had started buying back the land in 1910, and how by 1918 he had managed to get it all again, all except the first 200 Logan acres, and the second 200 Grandpa bought from Mr. Wade Jameson. The thing I didn't tell him was all Mr. Granger had done to get our land since then. Dubé shook his head impressed. "One of these here days gonna have myself a place. Nice place like this one of my own." His eyes swept the land. "Y'all some kind of lucky." I followed his gaze, knowing that it was true. More students arrived, and Dubé and his sisters joined them inside. Most of the students, like the Crosses, were from day laboring or sharecropping families, and accustomed to their own one room. Tar-papered shacks, some with no more than a dirt floor, they moved shyly into our house, which, with its 5 rooms, was larger than most, and even a bit on the grand side, I suppose. With a fireplace in each bedroom, a door leading to the outside from each room, 3 porches, and space enough for the family to live comfortably. Some of the boys and girls seemed intimidated by the life-size facial photographs of family members which stared down at them from the walls in Mama and Papa's room, and by the massive sturdy furniture built by Grandpa which filled the house, and they touched nothing if they could help it, as if afraid they might break something. But there were others, barefooted and ragged, who, when they thought no one from the family was watching, ventured to run timid fingers along the frame of Mama and Papa's bed and stare in amazement at its pine headboard reaching halfway up the 12-foot wall, to poke a finger in the feather mattress, unlike their own stuffed with corn husks, to stand shyly before the full-length mirror in the chiffonier, gazing at themselves, to trace the curve of Grandpa's roll-top desk, now Mama's, and to sit down gingerly before the fireplace in one of the 4 cushioned wicker-back chairs, closing their eyes as they sank deep into its comfort. With examinations less than a week away, students soon overflowed the sitting area, but Mama, unperturbed, opened up other rooms, and dividing the students into groups, moved from one room to another, reviewing lessons, answering questions, and assigning review exercises. Students worked long and hard without a grumble, and since the boys and I had to study anyway, we sat right there with everybody else. But as soon as Mama dismissed the sessions, we shot out back to find Papa and Mr. Morrison. Crossing the backyard, we ran through the garden gate and along the path that separated the cotton field from the garden, through the orchard with its apple, pear, peach, and fig trees, and into the open pasture. At the pasture's edge, just beyond the orchard, was the old one-room tenant shack where Mr. Morrison slept, and just beyond that, the bull's pen. Papa and Mr. Morrison were standing there as we ran up. "Don't get too near that fence," Papa warned us. Mr. Morrison waved languidly toward 3-year-old Dynamite, who was staring sourly out at us. "How much you suppose he weighing now?" "Oh, I'd say somewhere around 1,000 pounds. His daddy's a good couple of thousand. You've seen him. Henry Harrison's 12-year-old. Yeah, I seen him all right. That's a mean bull he got, and this one's coming up just like him." Papa grinned and nodded toward Dynamite. "I don't much care how mean they get, long as they're good stock and do the job." Mr. Morrison agreed. You sell him now, you ain't going to get near about what he's worth. I looked around sharply. Papa, you ain't thinking about selling dynamite? Papa pulled one of my braids. Gotta sell something, honey. There was no argument I could make to that. You can hang on to him, Mr. Morrison continued. He'd more than pay for himself. What with him being able to breed now, you could develop yourself a right fine stock. Papa stared thoughtfully at the bull, but did not reply. Mr. Morrison glanced at Papa's somber face and added, "Course, you know all that. Stacy, you're Papa back there?" Stacy waved at Dubé standing in the middle of the backyard. "Yeah, he here. But Dubé, instead of coming to join us, disappeared, going back toward the drive." What'd he want, I wondered. Beats me, Stacy admitted, then stiffened as Dubé reappeared with two men. One of the men was white. "Papa, there's a white man coming." Both Papa and Mr. Morrison turned at the warning and waited, their eyes on the men coming through the garden. Mr. Logan," said Dubé as they came into the pasture. These here gentlemen say they want to see you. I seen them outside and thought I'd bring 'em back." "Name's Morris Wheeler," the white man said, extending his hand to Papa. "This fellow with me is John Moses." John Moses also shook Papa's hand, then Mr. Morrison's. "L.T. Morrison's the name," said Mr. Morrison. Mr. Wheeler smiled. "Figured you had to be. Heard about you already." He too shook Mr. Morrison's hand, then looked again at Papa. "Y'all don't mind, I'll get right to why we come. Y'all heard of the Farm Workers Union?" Papa studied Mr. Morris Wheeler before he answered. "Heard some talk." "Well, I'm one of the organizers of it. Come down from Arkansas way. Was a country extension agent when this Agricultural Adjustment Administration came into being. And I tell you, I just didn't take to what was happening. Tenants and sharecroppers getting thrown off their land. Money supposed to be coming to them, getting put in the pockets of the plantation owners. John Moses here, he was a sharecropper. Lost what little he had because he didn't get that government money like he's supposed to. His landlord didn't think he owed it to him. Ain't had no place to go. Wife got the pneumonia along with his two youngins living out in the open. All of 'em died. That's what come of this agricultural adjustment business." John Moses, his eyes blank, nodded in affirmation. "Where I was, folks was having a sorrowful time and blaming me for it too," continued Mr. Wheeler. "Got roughed up a couple of times, but I couldn't blame nobody. It's hard on folks seeing their cotton plowed up when it's just ready for picking, then not even getting a red cent for it." Mr. Wheeler waited a moment before going on. "Now, don't get me wrong. Something had to be done to try and get prices back up. I just don't figure the government's going about it the best way. One day I got tired of seeing people going sick and hungry. Got tired of seeing a few poor souls who got up the courage to ask their landlords about their money getting put off their farms cause of it. That's when me and a couple of other folks decided to do something and formed the Farm Workers Union. Got it together last summer and we planning to take it all across the South. There's other unions like ours and most figured to get tenants and sharecroppers to join together and demand some changes about these government payments. Make other conditions better too." He glanced around at Dubé standing next to John Moses. "Didn't you say you was a day laborer, boy?" "Yes, sir." "How much you get a day?" 4 bits. 50 cents. Sun up to sundown," remarked Mr. Wheeler with a disgusted shake of his head. What's top wage round here? 75 cents? Mr. Wheeler turned back to Papa. Now you and me both know that's a crying shame. The union wants to get them wages raised. He met Papa's eyes. And we gonna need your help. Papa studied him, a question in his eyes. From what you've been saying, this union's for tenants and sharecroppers. Mr. Wheeler nodded. Day laborers, too. Well, I'm just wondering why you come to see me then. Figure if you know who I am, you know too. My family owns this land. Mr. Wheeler looked over at John Moses and the two exchanged a knowing smile. That's a fact. But to tell the truth, we come, 'cause since we've been down in here, your name's come up several times. We heard about the boycott. I caught the swift glance of Stacy's eyes and looked again at Mr. Wheeler. Heard you and your wife got it all organized against the Wallace store, 'cause the Wallaces was supposed to have set a couple of colored fellas on fire down round Smelling's Creek. Heard, too, more'n a dozen families joined in with you, and Mr. Morrison Hill called goods from Vicksburg to keep 'em going. Seems you managed to keep it going a good 3 months before the landlords broke it. Papa's eyes were steady on Mr. Wheeler. He said nothing. Again Mr. Wheeler smiled. Now I know you're wondering why I brought that up. Well, simply put, because I was very impressed by what I heard. You got folks who was scared to death of what could happen to them to try and change things around here. You got 'em to join together and stand up for something. I figure you did it once. Most likely, you can do it again. Folks join anything, Papa said. It's 'cause they make up their own minds to do it. That's a fact, but when they see somebody they respect supporting a thing, then it's easier for them to join themselves. It's a risk they be taking, like the boycott. But you support this union, and I suspect there'll be a lot of folks thinking more about joining. This union you got, said Mr. Morrison. It just for the colored? Mr. Wheeler hesitated. No, colored and white. Papa and Mr. Morrison looked at each other. From their faces it was obvious that any support Mr. Wheeler might have been gaining lessened with this information. Mr. Wheeler realized what the look meant and spoke hurriedly. It's colored and white, 'cause that's the only way this thing can work. If we go one without the other, we just ain't gonna be strong enough. Now, I ain't saying I'm for social changes across the board. I'm just being honest with y'all now, telling y'all the same thing I'd tell a white farmer. But we gonna win this thing. We gonna have to join together. There ain't no way around it, and folks are just gonna have to make up their minds to what's more important, their racial feelings or keeping a roof over their heads. That's just what it comes down to. One can't do it without the other. Dynamite snorted loudly, and Papa took the time to look out at him. When he turned again to Mr. Wheeler, he said, What you say makes sense. But I always like to think a thing through before I decide. Mr. Wheeler seemed pleased. Heard you was that kind of man, and I'm glad to see you are. I ain't rushing no decision from you. Just keep in mind that as a mixed union, we've been able to bring a lot of what's been going on locally to the attention of folks in Washington. Like the things of these local and county AAA committees been pulling. You know, they the ones that make a lot of the decisions concerning the way the program's carried out, how many acres can be planted, and so on. And you know who's sitting on your And you know who's sitting on your committees here? Granger, Montier, Walker, the big landowners. Not a colored farmer, not a sharecropper, or a small landowner among them. And believe me, they're making this thing work for them too. Mr. Wheeler waited a moment as if expecting Papa to say something. Papa didn't. People out of Washington been investigating complaints about these landlords and how they've been misusing the AAA as a union we can put the pressure on and keep it on. John Moses finally opened his mouth and spoke. I done been in colored unions before. Always got broke up. White folks bees in this one. It ain't gonna be so easy to go breaking us up. 'Cause some of them same ones be in our mixed union be's the ones busting up the colored union. Mr. Wheeler nodded, confirming his statement. We're gonna be meeting with folks the next few weeks through here. Planning on meeting in groups of 10 at different places till we cover everybody. Don't want where we meeting and what we doing to reach the wrong set of ears. One other thing. He paused, hesitant. We'd be interested in using your barn for one of the meetings. Papa only stared at him, and he hurriedly amended, I know, I'm a white man and you don't know nothing about me. And I understand that, but I am an honest white man. What I believe in, I fight for tooth and nail. And a man go along with me in something, I would never turn my back on him. Now that's the truth of it. Well, like the other things, said Papa. I have to think on it and discuss it with my family. Fair enough. By the way, these first meetings won't be mixed. We figure it's better to keep them separate until folks decide just what they want to do. He put out his hand to Papa and Mr. Morrison once more. Well, I won't keep y'all from your work no longer. Just hope y'all think about joining us. He turned then and headed back toward the house, with John Moses following. Don't bother walk back front with us. We'll see ourselves out. No bother. We was headed back that way, Papa said. He motioned toward Lady and Jack grazing near the forest on the south side of the pasture. Stacy, y'all go bring 'em in. I want to take a look at their shoeing. Hey, Dubé, you want to go with us? Stacy said as the men walked away. Dubé shook his head. No. His eyes were on the union men. Think I'm going to catch up with them union men. Got me some questions. Then waving goodbye, he ran after them. The boys and I watched him a moment, then crossed the pasture. Bet I can get there for y'all, challenged Little Man and took off. Christopher John and I followed, racing across the pasture. But Stacy, too old for such things on this particular day, chose to walk. I'm gonna ride Lady, Little Man proclaimed when we reached the animals. Not me, I'm gonna ride Jack, declared Christopher John, who for some strange reason always preferred the sturdy plod of the ornery mule to the sleek swiftness of Lady. Wait a minute, Christopher John, Stacy said, knowing that Jack had a mind of his own and that after only a short while of munching the drying grass would not feel too pleased about having an 8-year-old boy riding on his back. Stacy helped Christopher John on, then turned to help me, but I didn't need his help. In the past few months I had mastered the art of leaping onto Lady without a saddle, a stunt none of the grown-ups had seen me perform, and one which Stacy warned me about. Now I executed it with such ease that he only frowned as Little Man looked on with admiration. Soon's I get me another inch, I'm going to be able to do that too, he said. An inch? I declared, insulted. Boy, you're going to need a whole lot of inches before you can do anything like that. Come on. Since Little Man objected to being lifted onto the horse, Stacy cupped his hand for Little Man's foot, and Little Man climbed on behind me. Stacy climbed onto Jack in front of Christopher John, and the four of us raced the wind across the wide pasture, laughing and yelling. As always, Jack, once he recognized that Stacy was master, joined in the spirit of the race and tried to outdistance us. But he was no match for Lady. Lady was the granddaughter of a thoroughbred. Lady was magic. At the edge of the pasture, we slowed Lady and Jack to a walk. Stacy, Little Man, and I jumped down to lead the animals along the path, but Christopher John raised up on Jack and squinted across the unplanted cotton field toward the road. "Look there," he said. Coming toward the house was a yellow car trimmed in black. "I ain't never seen no yellow car afore." We watched the car until we lost sight of it as it disappeared on the other side of the house. "Come on," said Stacy. Christopher John jumped down from Jack's back, and we all continued along the path to the backyard. Crossing the yard to the barn, we looked again toward the road. The yellow car had slowed, as if the driver was looking at the house. For a moment, we all stared at the car. Then Christopher John dropped Jack's reins and ran down the drive. "Uncle Hammer!" he cried. "Uncle Hammer, that's you, ain't it?" The car picked up speed and turned into the driveway. When it stopped, a tall, well-dressed man wearing a three-piece suit and felt hat and looking very much like Papa got out. Christopher John had been right. It was Uncle Hammer. Christopher John was first in his arms. The rest of us hurried to meet him, leaving both Jack and Lady to munch the side yard grass. Uncle Hammer laughed as he hugged us, then stood back. "Lord, it ain't been but 3 months since I seen y'all. And look here, each of y'all must have grown a good several inches." He shook his head in amazement. "How's everybody?" "Just fine," we replied in unison. Then Little Man noted, "Uncle Hammer, you went and got a new car?" "Well, it ain't hardly new, but it'll do." Little Man frowned. "How come it yellow?" "Why not?" questioned Uncle Hammer, a smile spreading across his face at Little Man's conservatism. "Truth is, I got it for a little bit of nothing from a man who liked bright colors. I said bright colors made him feel good. Especially liked yellow. Said yellow made him feel like the sun was shining all the time. Now, ain't nothing wrong with that, is it?" "Hammer, good Lord, son, something wrong?" We turned. Big Ma was standing at the back porch, her face etched in surprise. "We wasn't expecting you." "You want Mama, I'll turn right round and go on back to Chicago," he teased. "You hush up, boy." Big Ma reprimanded him and stepped down from the porch. "Come on over here and hug these old bones." Uncle Hammer laughed and went to her. "Just got me a few days and thought I'd come home and help with the planting. Figured that was the least I could do, seeing I couldn't stay no time when I come home Christmas." He hugged Big Ma to him warmly. Letting her go, turned to find Mama and Papa and Mr. Morrison coming down the porch, and the hugging started all over again. "Sure is good to see y'all, sister. How you doing?" "I'm fine, but you taking care of yourself? You look thin." "Just working hard, that's all. David, that leg's looking good now." "Feeling good, too. See, you got yourself a car." "Man, had to. Mr. Morrison, how you making it? Still taking care of things?" "Trying to, Hammer. Trying to." Uncle Hammer put an arm around Big Ma. "Mama, now, I know y'all done had breakfast a long time ago, and dinner's still a good couple of hours away. But I tell you what, my mouth's really watered up for, and that's some of them fine biscuits of yours, some oil sausages, and some clabber milk, and some good old cane syrup. Think I could bother you for some?" "Boy, what you saying? I know you ain't half eaten up north, and you probably ain't ate much of nothing on your way down here. Come on in this kitchen." In less than an hour, Big Ma had not only rolled out a batch of biscuits for Uncle Hammer, but cooked a pot of grits, oiled sausages, gravy, and eggs as well. She also brewed a pot of coffee he had brought with him, and when everything was ready, we all sat down with him at the table, the adults sharing the coffee with him. The boys and I ate the food. As we ate, the boys and I sat engrossed as Uncle Hammer talked of the North and of his trip south. 3 years older than Papa, Uncle Hammer was unmarried and came whenever he could. He was the only uncle we knew, and we loved him dearly. Yet we were often spellbound when he was near, for we were in awe of him and had never quite been able to talk to him as easily as we could to Papa and Mr. Morrison. He was, as Big Ma described him, a little wild, and was known throughout the community for his temper, something a black man in Mississippi couldn't afford to have. "I'm sure glad you brought this coffee," Papa said as he put down his cup. "We ain't had coffee since sometime. I'd have brought some Christmas if I'd have known y'all didn't have none." Papa smiled at him. "Way you was traveling, you couldn't have carried much more than you was." "Ain't that the truth? But I tell you one thing, I'd rather ride the rail any time than take them no-count buses. When you ride the rail, leastways you ain't got to pay to sit in the back." "Well," said Mr. Morrison, "you ain't got to sit in the back no more. Now you got yourself another car. When do you get it?" "End of January. It ain't much, but it gets me where I'm going. And after I got rid of that Packard, I figured I ought to be able to walk a while. I done it enough before I got it. But then, when I come home last couple of times and took that bus, I said I wasn't going to take no more buses or trains down here. Leastways none I had to pay for. And seeing I be coming home whenever I can, I figured I needed that old heap out there." "I like it, Uncle Hammer," commented Christopher John, then immediately grew quiet again. "Glad you do, son. We'll go riding in it 'fore long. Man, pass me some more of them hot biscuits sitting right there in front of you, will you, son?" Little man grinned, pleased to be the one called upon, and with both hands carefully passed him the plate. Uncle Hammer thanked him, took two of the fat biscuits and smeared them with fresh butter. "By the way," he said, "coming up the road here I passed a truck with a white fella driving and 2 colored fellas sitting up front with him. Looked like one of them was Miss Rosa Cross's boy." "Was," said Papa. "I was just telling Mary and Mama 'fore you come that 2 Union men come by. They was going to drop Dubay off near home." "Union? Y'all mentioned something about that when I was home Christmas. I didn't think it was down this way yet." "Well, it is now." Big Ma shook her head in puzzled disbelief. "Just can't believe this Union talk. Maybe the Union make out long Arkansas way, but these here white folks in Mississippi ain't never gonna stand for no Union, especially no mixed Union." "Just what they planning on doing down in here?" asked Uncle Hammer. Papa told him what Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Moses had said. He also told him about the visits of both Mr. Farnsworth and Mr. Granger, and the government's 50% cotton tax. Uncle Hammer was silent when he finished. He thought a moment, then said, "What you going to do about the tax?" "What can we do about it?" questioned Papa. "They got us between a rock and a hard place. We got to plant like everybody else, contract or not, with that tax. Won't get any government money on them acres we don't plant, but at least we ought to get the same selling price on our cotton." Uncle Hammer let out a deep sigh. He had the same worried look Papa had had after he had first heard about the tax. "Well, one good thing, they take you back on the railroad. You won't have to totally depend on them crops. That's more than a lot of folks." Papa rubbed his fingers on the table in a slow, thoughtful motion. Well, I don't know about that. What? I don't know if I'll be going to the railroad. You don't think you'll be able to get back on? I've asked him not to go. Uncle Hammer looked over at Mama. Oh? David, he been looking for outside work around here, Big Ma explained. Uncle Hammer drank the last of his clabber milk. Any luck? Not so far, said Papa. Again, Uncle Hammer glanced at Mama. You don't get anything, David. You still planning on staying? You and me both know I can't stay. That be the case. Mama's face tensed. Papa looked down at the table at her. She looked away. Course, with my leg broke last spring and I ain't been back, I might not even be able to get back on the railroad. Less'n I just happened to get there at the right time, and the right man's in charge. Then you'll have to be deciding soon, Uncle Hammer concluded. Papa nodded. That's right, he agreed, his eyes still on Mama. Soon. And I'm going to stop right here, and we'll do a second video. Put your name and a comment in the comment section below this video. Be sure you're subscribed to my channel and you click on the little bell. And only one comment per person. And at the end of August, in honor of our 2,000 subscribers, this little bunny, I will choose one name to send this little bunny to. Or, if you prefer to have another little animal, let me know, and I'll make it for you and send it to you. The 1st of September is when it'll be going out in the mail, but the drawing will be the end of August. Thank you again, my 2,000 subscribers! Woo! 2,000 subscribers! Woo! And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.